Hello, everybody, and welcome to Trash Talk with DJ Talks Trash. That's right. I'm doing a new show where I just talk to some of my pals, some people whose work I admire, some people who I think might have some insight on stuff going on in the world today, and I talk trash with them. Is this a talk show? Is it an interview show? We'll find out together. It's a journey. But I knew for my first guest, I wanted to have my good pal Sal, who you may be familiar with from shows that I do called Spider-Versity and Mutant Academy. Sal, for people, the rare people that will be watching this show but are unfamiliar with those shows, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, hi, I'm Sal. I make comic book YouTube videos and podcasts from those YouTube videos, and everything is under the umbrella known as ComicPop.
Oh,
a
shit.
channel where we talk all about comics. That was coordinated, but unintentionally. I was like, what am I wearing today? I remember, man, when I got into Tenacious D.
Yeah. I mean, we all remember when we got into Tenacious D.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anybody who watches dudes talking to microphones on the internet has a Tenacious D CD.
Yeah. Yep. Somewhere.
But when I got into Tenacious D, I remember there was a line that he says where he's getting ready. He's vamping in the middle of his song. Jack is.
Yeah.
And he says, someone has to be able to say, like, okay, it's gig time. What t-shirt am I going to wear? Waking up at the crack of noon.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, that would be the dream. And I am living it today, ladies and gentlemen. I get to wake up at the crack of noon.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, okay, it's gig time.
Yeah.
What t-shirt am I going to wear? And I go through my assortment of t-shirts and I'm like, today, I think I'm going to go self-promotion.
I love it. I think that's the right call. I punked out. I just went with the black. I
almost wore black. It was going to look like a weird, off-Broadway show.
Coordinated. Yeah. And it just, because I was filming another show today and it's like, I don't want to be too specific on one thing. And I don't want to do a costume change in between shows, even though that's what a pro would do.
Sure.
But yeah, everybody, there will be a link in the description. Go check out ComicPop. It's great stuff, doing good stuff over there. Before we get it, we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. But before we do that, I kind of wanted to start off, ease our way in. What are you into this week? Over on my other show, Only Stupid Answers, this is how we used to start shows. And I thought this would be I thought I'd pilfer it for this. What are you into? What are you watching, reading? Is there something this week or whenever that you're like, oh man, yeah, I've been digging this?
Yeah, well, I finally, in 2024, saw Godzilla -1.
Ooh, so good.
Took forever. But I saw it, and it's great, and I loved it. We all loved it. But
we all loved it.
That was like a movie I saw recently where I was like, "Oh, cool."
Yeah. Did you cry?
No.
Okay.
No, I didn't. I remember hearing, people say, "I can't believe I'm crying at the end of a Godzilla movie."
Yeah.
I didn't cry. Because I don't know why I thought the movie was going to be more dark or more bleak than it was. It's pretty dark. I mean, it's a post-war Japan.
Yeah. And I will say, not spoiler, we're going to keep it spoiler free, but some of its darkest moments, it does walk back at the end, which that was part of like, I wouldn't have done that. I would have committed. I was
surprised they did. I was surprised by how hopeful it got.
Yes.
Like, I thought it was going to be a weird kind of like, you really should have died kind of story. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know if I want to go on a death wish journey.
Yeah. It's a surprisingly optimistic film.
That's exactly what I was going to say. And I'm like, I was surprised.
Yeah.
I love the design of Godzilla. I love the depiction of Godzilla. I love the decisions they made.
Yeah.
Like his spike shooting out every time he charges up.
Yep.
I love that he heals from injury, and we see it happen. I love how big he is in proportion to boats.
Yeah.
I think it was a smart move. You feel like it was definitely a decision where maybe the story came first. Maybe they were like, I want to tell a story about, a kamikaze pilot who doesn't go through with it and the journey and the guilt he feels associated with that. And then they went, but what if we put Godzilla in there? Like someone like me going like, but what if a Predator showed up?
Yeah.
What if the Godzilla was in it? And
that's great. That's great. That emotional journey, that's great. But hear me out. What if Godzilla though?
But what if Godzilla shows up? And then it's like, he's the metaphor for like the guilt that looms over him large.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I wonder what came first. Was it like, we need to do another Godzilla movie. Let's make it like cool and subversive.
Yeah.
Or were they like, I want to tell this really like quiet, bleak drama And then someone went, let's make it dope, though.
Yeah.
I don't know which one came first. I don't care. I'm just kind of like, but I love the nebulousness of it. And I love that, like, that was the approach, because that's my jam. I'm ready for that.
Totally.
You know?
Did you see Shin Godzilla?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I did not enjoy.
Oh, really? I'm a big fan of Shin Godzilla. I'm a big fan of Shin Godzilla as well. And I like what I like is that it feels like Japan looked over at the legendary movies, the Godzilla versus the Kongs. And they're like, "Oh, okay, so they've got goofy Godzilla fights other monsters covered. What if we go back and start using Godzilla again to unpack our national traumas? What if that's what we use Godzilla as?" And it's cool, man. It's fucking,
it is cool.
It's just it's cool that they can do that. I remember, I think it was Gareth Edwards, whoever directed the first legendary Godzilla. And he was like, I saw Godzilla -1 and I was so jealous. I'm like, yeah, I would be too. I would also.
Well, especially because, like, oh my God, it's under budget.
Yep.
It looks good.
Yep.
It has high drama. It is actually emotional and connective. Like, there's real work being done in here, and it didn't cost $350 million.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those other things too that I think, because whenever I talk about we talking about Godzilla X Kong or whatever, and inevitably people are like, they should just take the humans out of it. They should be humans in this movie. And it's like, I actually think that's the wrong instinct, because when you look at something like Godzilla -1, and a lot of it's, there's a lot of Spielberg DNA in that movie. So I think about like Jurassic Park. It's like, no, you just need the humans to be interesting and have interesting things to do. That's what you need to do. Because I hate to break it to you, gang. I love Godzilla and I love Kong. They're there for people to react to. They're not built to carry a movie.
Yeah. I wouldn't watch a movie where, I've seen a Star Wars movie without any humans in it. It's the first 10 minutes of the Star Wars Holiday Special where it's just a house full of Wookiees all growling at each other.
Yeah.
With no subtitles.
Yeah.
Like, that is essentially what you would get in a Godzilla versus Kong movie with no humans in it, or a Godzilla movie with no humans in it. Like, what you're saying when you're saying, I want a movie like that without the humans, you're saying the humans are not relatable or interesting enough for me to care.
Yes.
I mean, easily the biggest blunder of that movie was making Aaron Taylor Johnson the lead and not Bryan Cranston, and killing Bryan Cranston halfway through the movie. Like, everyone was like, oh, like, people were hyped for 3 reasons for that first trailer.
Yeah.
The Halo jump.
Yep.
Godzilla being in it.
Yeah.
And Bryan Cranston.
Yeah.
That was it. And it was like, just give them all those things. And the Halo jump was cut short. Bryan Cranston was cut short. And Godzilla was like, only in every 10 shots. It was like weird. It's not bad. I do like the first Godzilla, American legendary Godzilla movie, but yes, there were missteps. There were significant missteps, and they were basically just like, I used to be really critical of the screenwriter David Koepp.
Yep.
Because I think that he is horribly simplistic. His characters are like, they speak in vagaries.
Yeah.
Like, David Koepp wrote Spider-Man 1 and 2, and I used to be very critical of those movies until I found out just how beloved those movies were, and people come for my blood. But like, I was very critical. Like, there's that scene where Peter's at Octavius's apartment, and they're all talking about like how they met, and they're like, I was teaching the theory of, Koepp, like, I was teaching insert generic science term people know. And she was teaching at insert like generic college. Oh, we didn't come up with a name.
Yeah.
So she just says, I met him on the college steps.
Yeah.
It's just, he writes in such broad strokes.
Yeah.
Right. There's no room, or there's so much room that it's just, all you get are these stock wooden caricatures of each other. Like, we feel bad for Dr. Octopus. Why? Because our protagonist likes him and he has wife.
Yeah.
Like, oh, but Alfred Molina is then able to take like such, like, it's like the movie's held together by these big spaces between the connection, and then he fills it with character.
Yeah.
And if you have actors who can do that, you have Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
And Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
If you don't, you have Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. Like, it's with Jurassic Park. It's not that the people are terribly complex, but the casting is interesting. You've got the casting is good in that movie, like you were just talking about, and also there is an arc You know,
everyone gets an arc.
Yeah.
Every single character except for Muldoon gets an arc.
It's a very basic, simple arc, but that's kind of all you need for like they know the movie they're making.
Because they know you're there for the dinosaurs. Like, yes, I'm there for the logo is not a Marvel Photoshop job of all these faces from Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
The logo is that iconic logo.
Yep.
That's the poster. So Superman logo, Batman logo, Jurassic Park, Ghostbusters, every iconic movie. The only problem with Indiana Jones is Indiana Jones, you can't make a poster with a whip and a hat on it. Although you could, it's just
you could try. I'm sure they tried. I'm sure they've tried.
Right? Except that, like, the other thing was, I remember them talking about like recasting Indiana Jones back in the day, and it was like, nope, dude. Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford's face.
That's it. You can't. That's one you just can't. And it's to the degree that when they're like, what was the Dial of Destiny? It's like, I mean, maybe just again, because Last Crusade's such a perfect ending for that franchise.
Literally, you're right done. Off the sunset. It is like that movie. I know Tarantino apparently does not like Last Crusade.
Whatever.
How dare you? But I love Last Crusade so much. It's so picture perfect. It's beautiful. And I watch it every couple of months, especially now that I have it on 4K.
And it's one of those things, like when people say like Raiders is the best one, I understand what you're saying.
I get it. I appreciate that.
And because Raiders is great, and I'm not this. In fact, and I'll even go to bat for Temple of Doom.
I like Temple of Doom.
I like Temple of Doom,
especially in comparison.
It's one of those things. Of the original 3 is the weakest. Yes, there have been 2 other ones since then that are not as good as Temple of Doom.
But the third best Indiana Jones movie.
Yep. But my favorite is Last Crusade. That's my favorite.
Easily.
And,
but when they ride off into that beautiful horizon, and then knowing from the Fabelmans, like, when the horizon is here, it's interesting.
Oh my God, that scene! So you've seen the Fabelmans?
Yeah.
Okay. So I thought listen, if any filmmaker gets to make a masturbatory, here's the magical origin story of me becoming one of the most famous directors in the world. Spielberg gets to do that. I'm not going to say
put your name on it.
Yeah.
Just say it's you.
Say
Don't
it's Spielberg.
Make up characters.
But I don't care for that stuff. It's a perfectly good movie because Spielberg is Spielberg and he knows what he's doing.
Like, The Terminal is well made. I would never watch it again.
But that final scene in the Fabelmans, like, it was worth it. I remember when we got there, I was like, this whole movie has been worth it just for this, if for no other reason. So for people that don't know what we're talking about, is it Henry Ford? Is that who he's supposed to be?
Yes.
Okay. So part of Spielberg's, and this is true,
not
part
Henry
of his
Ford, I'm sorry. It's
sorry,
it's John Ford.
John Ford. Sorry. Henry Ford is the guy that
Henry Ford invented the car.
Sorry, everybody. Part of Spielberg's backstory, and this was happening. He was like interning at the studio, and he got to meet a director, John Ford, that was hugely influential to him. And according to him, the way it happens in the movie is basically the way it happens. Yeah. In the movie, that person is played by David Lynch. And the second he shows up, my brain is immediately like, wait, I'm so sorry. Steven Spielberg and David Lynch were in a room together. What did they talk? This scene's great, actually. I love it, but I don't care what's happening. I want to know what they talked about. What did those 2 guys talk about?
Yeah. Just like, yes. I want to see them all work together. I want to see them make things and mentor people.
Yeah.
You know that David Lynch almost directed Return of the Jedi, right?
Yes.
Like, I want to see that movie so bad.
Yeah. And Spielberg almost directed Return of the Jedi. That's probably what they talked about. It's like, I remember when we both didn't do Return of the Jedi.
Remember that weird meeting we had with George when he talked about Wookiees? Like, yes. No. Oh, God. What a weirdo.
So here's the other thing. Did you hear about how that happened?
What, the getting Lynch into the Fabelmans?
Into Fabelmans.
No.
Okay. He didn't want to do it. And the reason he gave is like, I just don't think I could do what Spielberg wants, and I don't want to let him down. And so Spielberg hit up mutual friend Laura Dern, and he's like, "Hey, can you help me?" Well, and it wasn't gonna be. It was, I think it was their casting director that was like, who would do really well as Ford is David Lynch. They kind of look alike. You know what I mean? And he hit up Laura Dern, and Laura Dern helped him negotiate David Lynch being in it. And Lynch's one caveat is like, okay, but I need the costume. I think it was like a week in advance, and he wore it every day of the week leading up to it. And it was one of those things when I read, I'm like, fucking David Lynch. And then I thought, actually, especially for somebody that's not a professional actor, it helps you get into, like, it's very method, but it's like, okay, now I understand I understand this guy's clothes as much as he understood his own clothes. I've worn it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and I can exist in this space. And it's just him talking about the horizon line. And it's just perfect. If you haven't seen that scene, the scene is perfect.
Yep.
I love it. I'm glad the Fabelmans exist just for that scene.
All he needed to do was shoot that scene and release it, and that would have been fine. But knowing that and knowing that story, and so I've heard Spielberg tell that story, and then seeing the story acted out it's only great because David Lynch is in it.
Yes.
But knowing that and then seeing what Spielberg does with that information in his career, you're like, oh my god,
yeah,
like, that's how he set himself apart.
Yeah,
like that's how he developed his visual style. Like, it's just amazing.
Yeah, you just put the camera where it's most interesting.
Yeah,
that's good advice. That's good advice. That is good advice.
Well, and it's just, you need to know what interesting looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And he's thankfully it's not just knowing that fact. It's also being able to discern what is interesting and how to shoot it. And oh my god,
so
it's amazing.
Jumping off of determining what is interesting, Sal, you mentioned that you do this channel called ComicPop, and you and I have been friends for a while now. But I don't know that I know the origin story of ComicPop. How did you go about starting it?
Well, man, so I've been doing this for 10 years. So we're going back 10 years, like 2014, 2015.
Oh, the stars in our eyes,
right?
Brighter world in 2014.
Yeah. And this is where it might get a little embarrassing because when I first got into YouTube, it was because of my interest. Well, my getting here was not a straight line like most people's careers and most people's artistic pursuits. I wanted to make film. I wanted to make movies. I wanted to write scripts. I wrote like 24 movies and screenplays over the years. Yeah. To varying degrees of irrelevancy. I was part of different script sharing websites, and I read everything and I absorbed everything, and I shot my own movie in 2005, and it was so abysmal because all I wanted to do was make movies. It wasn't about learning how to make movies, and so it looks like a Kevin Smith movie but with less talent. And so it just sucks. And but that was very like that shook me really hard, but not in a way where I was like, because I'm also incredibly stubborn and resilient, like, and that's not necessarily like a self pat on the back. That was just like, I don't give up, and that might be because I'm too stupid. But I wouldn't stop, and then I went off to school, and I got into comics again, and like comic books helped, like, really satisfying artistic search for me. It was so it was movies and comics, and I loved comics when I was a kid, but I got out of them when I was a teenager because I was like, I meet girls. I can't look. I'm already a nerd. I can't. Exactly.
I got to do myself some favors. All right.
Right. Like I either have like glasses or a club foot. I don't need both. But so I got back into comics, and I'm reading comics, and I'm hoping to get into movies, and I meet this friend of mine, and we start developing this concept, and that concept becomes a fledgling cartoon series, which we pitched to numerous different outlets, which doesn't work out. So then I'm like, well, why don't I turn this into a comic book? So I develop that into a comic book, and then I start selling that and trying to make that into a thing, and that doesn't work out. But it doesn't, like, these are all places where I'm trying to get into some artistic outlet. Yeah. In that pursuit, like of making comics and my interest in film, I discovered my love for editing. And so I'd shoot everything. Like, I'd be filming my friends and I hanging out, or just different scenes, and I'd cut them together, and I found I could spend like 12 hours in an editing bay. I just lost time, and I was like, this is what it's like when people find out what they're good at. Yeah. And so I got way into editing, and so start shooting random stuff and making little videos. And then I'm like, I don't know where the hell to put these things. Well, thankfully YouTube came along and was like, this is the public access cable show of the world. And I was like,
exactly awesome. What it is. That's a good way to describe it. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. Well,
because I used to make like movie review shows and comic book review shows for no one because YouTube didn't exist. I was just shooting them and cutting them. And then I'd like contact our public access channel and be like, can we put this up? And they'd be like, no. And I was like, it's public access. And I got rejected. But it is. So when YouTube came along, I'm like, that's literally them, but without any arbiter. Yeah. So I get in that and start making stuff and throwing them online. And, like I I started watching different YouTubers and seeing what they were all about, and the Phil DeFranco show came up on my feed.
Yeah.
And I got way into Phil and get my news from him more or less. And then Phil launched this channel called SourceFed.
Yep. I'm familiar.
Yeah, I had a feeling. And I got way into SourceFed and SourceFed Nerd, and I started watching that. My friends and I would like sit and watch it, and I was like, "This is exactly what I want to do."
Yeah.
What they're doing here, like, it's these people were not friends. They all got together through application processes, like. But they put on a good facade of friendship and camaraderie. And I'm like, that's if I could take what I'm doing here, where me and my friends are hanging out and playing and doing stuff, and then apply that to like a show format, I think we'd have something.
Yeah. And
so we tried like sketch comedy and stuff like that. It didn't even reach the point of release. It was just like, no. We're like, this is not gonna happen.
Yeah.
But we just shoot all kinds of stuff, and then in the meantime, in the interim, I ended up just shooting review shows, and I was like, I'll do movie reviews and stuff like that. I know how to do that, and that'll be like what I do in between. Yeah. And so I started shooting those things and making them and putting them out there, and just aping off of what I was watching.
Yeah.
Doing
so much of that is just the creative
which is
process.
what it is.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like when you even talk about like your movie was a kind of a Kevin Smith thing. It's like, yeah, you're making a movie in 2005. You know what I mean? It was you're either going to rip off Kevin Smith, Quentin Tarantino, or Wes Anderson. Those are your options.
Or is there a scene in my Kevin Smith movie where characters are sitting around a diner table and they're all talking to each other, and I do a circle pan? Like, yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course.
So, like, did I steal the Reservoir Dogs meets Kevin Smith? And
you're an indie filmmaker in 2005. Of course, that's what you're gonna do. My student film I did in school was like, what if Tarantino but me? And the answer to that equation is not good. Is not good. Is what that is.
No one wants that.
Nobody wants that.
Oh, okay, fine. You got me.
Yeah.
But like that. But I noticed that like the movie reviews, obviously, it was around that time Red Letter Media was coming, so they were putting out stuff, and half of the bag launches, and so. I'm making movie reviews. They're making movie reviews. Their reviews are getting huge numbers. And I'm like, they're already doing the perfect version of what I want to do. So I'm wasting my time. But I'm also couching my movie reviews with comic book reviews. And those are starting to pick up. And I'm like, oh, so maybe I can lean into my comics. I love comics. I'm happy to talk about comics. So like, I'll start doing that. And then I was in my kitchen and I was chatting up with my friends. And my wife was there. She wasn't my wife at the time, but and so we're hanging out, and I was rereading Eric Larson and David Michelinie's Venom Returns, which is like the third appearance of Venom or whatever, and it was on my table, and the cover is this crazy image of Venom with his like face getting all like it's Brock with the Venom suit and this,
I know that. I know exactly. I have it in my brain. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yep.
And to a comic book fan, it's like, yeah, that's what Venom looks like. Yeah. And to someone who's never seen anything like that, Ethan just looks at it. He's like, what is happening to this man? Yeah. And I'm like, oh, well, that's Venom. And he's like, oh, I think I might have heard of Venom. And I'm like, you don't know what Venom is? And Ben's like, no, I don't either. And I'm like, oh, like I started explaining Venom, and and each explanation goes to another level, because it's like, oh, well, so Venom, he was Spider-Man's costume from the stars. And they're like, Spider-Man has an alien costume? And I'm like, well, he went to Battle World and Secret Wars. And they're like, what are you talking about? Yep. And I'm like, this is, and the gears are working, but my wife just looks at this, and as I'm explaining it, she's like, this is your show. Mm-hmm. Your show is explaining comics to people who don't read them, and then them asking these funny questions and being funny themselves and developing it. So we just we had the camera out for other things. So we sat down, shot the show, and that was Back Issues. And I just kept doing that, and I haven't stopped doing it. I've missed a week in 10 years doing that show. And we spun out from there. And of course, like the SourceFed influence, I was like, well, we'll do, table talk and comic commentary and all this stuff. And, but comic book bent. And it essentially like allowed us to build to the point where it's a sustainable career that has spanned a decade, and has reached this point where like now I have comic book pros as regular members of the channel who talk on the show, and I've interviewed every single comic book like legend I've worshipped almost, outside of the ones who literally aren't alive anymore. But like I've accomplished a lot, and I've checked a lot of boxes. I've hit a lot of like bucket list items that weren't on a bucket list, like things that I would never even fathom as a result of it.
Yeah.
And through it all, it's also just making funny videos with my friends about comic books and making money off of it somehow.
So the beginning of back issues is 2014. That's when it kind of
2014.
2014.
Yeah, around there.
And the other thing is your timing there, I would imagine unintentionally, is kind of perfect because that's when, the not necessarily the comic industry in particular, but discussion about the source material for all these movies and stuff like that. That's what 2 years post Avengers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Is hitting its high point.
Oh yeah. While we're working, like the MCU is being born.
Yeah.
And it didn't hurt that around that time there were fewer comic book YouTubers than ever, and they were all building at the same time. And I got a call like within 4 episodes of back issues, so 4 weeks into the channel, which wasn't called ComicPop at the time, but that was a mistake that I just took too long to learn. I get a call from like Rob from Comics Explained. He's like, me and Benny the Comic Historian are like making podcasts. We want you.
Yeah.
So they pulled me in, and so like I got swept up in that with them, and they became friends, and we worked together on that. And as a result, like my show and channel got like in front of more people, and it definitely accelerated us in a way that it wouldn't have if it weren't for them too.
And it's interesting too, talking about that. That like you said, there's not a lot of people talking about that. That was kind of like when I was at SourceFed. That was the first time I was brought on camera. I think it was for Comic-Con, and none of them, like, obviously they'd all read comics and they were familiar with the comics, but I was more knowledgeable about that stuff. So they're like, I guess give my whatever, so you can talk about that. And of course that space is a lot more crowded now.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, it will, in any space that has room, or few people are talking about it. Once you see like success in it, you're going to see people who either like seek to elevate it or profit from it.
Yeah.
Or both.
Yeah.
Like, and I can't say that like the folks who are in the space that I'm in, are in either category. They're like, there's some folks who are doing stuff because they just love it and they just couldn't wait to get there, or they've been doing it and like something happened that finally like got them into a place of optics.
Yeah.
Where then you find them, like so many people find our channel and they're like, I never even heard of you guys. And you have 3,000 videos that I can watch. There's a ton of different comic book YouTubers now who are just doing completely different stuff, and it's really cool to see. Like, it's really cool to see like that space kind of like grow and blossom and expand. Like, there are people who do, comic book recaps and comic book stories and comic book video essays, and like you're gonna find that in any space. If you if you like birds, if you like Disney, if you like taxidermy, you're gonna find a video essayist who's gonna talk about like the most influential elements of those fields and give you an 18-minute video that like dramatically explains to you why
it's interesting. It's interesting how much audiences have been atomized into the very specific niche groups, and I know it's become harder when it just comes to advertising. It used to be like, if we play this ad in front of, that's still true in like something like the Super Bowl, but it used to be like, if we play this ad in front of Lost or in the middle of Lost's runtime, we're going to get such and such viewership. And it's like that's not true anymore. That's not true anymore. You know what I mean? And
I mean, like we're a living testament to that. Like when we've been on Comic Story and so many times over the last 10 years, and largest channel, 3 million subscribers today, but like biggest audience possible. We've been in front of that audience. I'm like, no, like the audience, the comic book, like, that's all of them.
Yeah.
3 million. Yeah. That's all of the comic book YouTube viewing audience.
Yep.
We've been in front of them. 100,000 of them say that they like us.
Yep.
That's it.
That's it.
Like as far as getting in front of the comic book YouTube audience, we have been in front of the
mission
whole
accomplished.
Audience. We did it, and we have determined that 1/100th of them are interested in us. But certainly I was definitely in that mindset where I'd be like, if we could get in front of the Red Letter Media audience, we'd be huge.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's true. I don't know. I think it's more like the audience, like you said, it's become so fragmented and it's become so niche. Like it'd be like saying, all I need to do is get in front of every Star Wars audience,
Mm-hmm.
and they will love us. It's like, well, Star Wars is not. It used to be one fandom.
Yep.
And now it's not.
Yeah.
It's like 100 fandoms.
And none of them like each other. And
they
none
all
of them
hate
like
each other. Comic books the exact same way.
Yeah.
You know, there are people who like the show that we made, our flagship show, is me and my two buddies making fun of comic books, more or less. I mean, I've learned and changed as well as the show has progressed, especially as I've gotten to know like comic book creators and being like, I should be a lot less flippant or a lot less condemning about it. But when we talk about it, you know, like there are comments of people being like, I only watch the Marvel episodes or the DC episodes. And I'm like, you're literally missing 50% of the show.
Yeah.
Like how could anyone watching this show say, I'm here only to know about the content of the book? Like you're here for the performance. You're here for the characters who are being clowns in front of you. Like if you're watching back issues, you're watching like a 120-minute video on, you know, Wolverine fighting Sabretooth, you know, to find out what happened in that fight, like you're on the wrong channel.
Yeah. You need to get Marvel Unlimited and just bring up that issue, man. Like
it'll take you 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It'll be way easier just to buy the comic, which is also why we put the comic in the. I'm like, even if I'm like, this book sucks, it's available for sale.
And speaking of,
because you never know.
You never know. And speaking of getting stuff in front of people, hellbentcomicbook.com, depending on when you're watching this, that should be live on Kickstarter. We got the complete edition, all 3 volumes of the run in one space. So if you've never checked out Hellbent before, it's a supernatural thriller. If you're a fan of Preacher, Sandman, Something's Killing the Children, you'll love Hellbent. This is your opportunity to get the whole story. If you've been keeping up with Hellbent over the years, there will be new stories in the collection. So there's something for everybody. Hellbentcomicbook.com. Go check it out. And I'm not above putting this out there. You know, I got a baby on the way, you know, so every piece of support is welcome and helpful. And thank you. I appreciate it. Okay. So yeah, so I'm assuming we've been kind of talking about how the space has changed and everything and how it evolved over the past 10 years. And I'm assuming you get people that ask you like, oh, what piece of advice do you have for the people wanting to break in? And as you've looked at stuff, how it's changed, you know, is there, because I've just been thinking about that because, you know, with comics like that, space is occupied. People talking about comics, they exist. People talking about video games, even more competitive.
Oh, exactly.
You know what I mean? And so it's like I do
comics,
wonder, other than like maybe if you go to a piece of real estate that maybe hasn't been staked out as much, like a TikTok or whatever.
Right.
You know, I wonder.
There's a big space there too. Like it's a crowded space in TikTok, YouTube, or in TikTok comics as well.
Yeah.
It's just very different. You know, like they don't have the patience. Like they're not going to watch a 10-minute video about comic books, much less a 120-minute long one about the story.
Yeah.
Or if they are, they're conditioned to watch it in 600 parts. But the comic book TikTok audience, very different from the comic book YouTube audience and the creators themselves. Like, and it's interesting to watch the crossover because like the comic book TikTok creators I've seen, like I know what they all look like. Like I know who they all are. I've seen them all. And you know, some of them break into the YouTube space, some of them haven't. And it's apples and oranges. Like it's just it doesn't translate one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's just interesting. It's interesting to see like what succeeds in what format.
And it's also interesting hearing you talk, you know, it reminds me of stuff like when you talk about your journey into getting in front of people and it, you know, so much of when people ask advice, there's certain tools and skill sets, and you talk about being stubborn, that are helpful in that stuff, but everybody's journey is different. And even more so when you look at the people that are really successful, I think we undersell culturally how much of that is luck at the right place at the right time, doing the right thing, and then you hit.
Yeah. That's why I'm very transparent about like any of our success or how we got anywhere. I mean, it really is. It is. You could be like they always say, and I remember when I tried to break into the webcomics space. Yeah, I remember following webcomics.com and, you know, being a member of it and paying for it and talking to different creators, and they were always like, cream rise to the top, man. Like in a space that's so crowded like webcomics, you just gotta have the best one. And it's just gotta be like, and if you put out a good product every week, the audience will be there. And I'm like, no, they will not. Not in a crowded ass space. Like if you're in a big room with 1,000 people, all you gotta do is yell louder than them and you'll be rescued. Like there's no reality where that is so.
No.
It is true that cream rises to the top. It is true that people recognize talent.
Yeah.
People also recognize like what is successful. People recognize what is cheap and easy.
Yeah.
You know, even that mentality, like the mentality of recognizing like cream does not necessarily always rise to the top. It does actually, it is a little bit freeing in its own way.
Yeah.
Where, you know, we used to do like a comic book review show where we would sit down like we do on Back Issues. I would shoot it. I would cut it. I'd mix it. I'd have pictures and images, and it'd be like 6 minutes long. And this would be on a book that came out like in the last 7 days. And it would get a certain number, and then it would just be completely irrelevant. And I spent 3 hours making it. Or I could do 10 of those in one live show.
Yeah.
1 day a week. And it would do exponentially better.
Yeah.
And I would have all these different ways in which it could succeed. And I could then convert that show into like an audio podcast and so forth. So it's like out of laziness or out of recognizing that some lazy, it's not necessarily lazy. It's just, it's working smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
And having that mentality, it can benefit you even if you seek to try and make like quality content.
Yeah.
But it's weird.
I remember I had a really sobering moment. It was around my first comic, my first Kickstarter comic, Chaos Theory.
Yeah.
And I was going to, Sam and I were going to Seattle Comic-Con. And I was like, this is my opportunity to talk to publishers and get them in front of people and stuff like that. And I was at some panel, I think it was the Image panel. And at the end, and I don't know why they do this because the questions at Comic-Con panels are insane. But they open it up, questions to the audience. And so many people the questions were like about breaking in and da-da-da. And it sunk in me. It's like, everybody here has the same goals and ambitions I do. Everybody here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, wow, this is who I'm competing with. You know what I mean?
That's true. That's true. And that can be freeing in its own way because you're like, it's either going to completely scare you away and you'll just find something else and seek happiness in another place, or it will force you to recognize, like, I need to stand out. Yeah. I need to work harder. I need to work smarter. I need to make a good product. I need to learn everything they know and more.
Yeah. Speaking of comics, do you have a memory of like your first comic or your first exposure to comics?
Oh yeah. No, I remember seeking out my first comic. I got it on like so many people in the early days, and why people scream from the rooftops about the importance of it. But I got my first comic book in a grocery store. Like so many people did and can't now.
Yep.
But it was a random Spectacular Spider-Man comic where he fights the Puma. It was part 2 of a 2-part story.
Puma.
Right? Puma. Like my first Spider-Man villain was freaking Puma.
Yeah.
And it was written by Jerry Conway, art by Sal Buscema. It's just an insane book.
Yeah.
Peter Parker's been absconded with Puma to Arizona, where they go on like a vision quest where their totemic animals blast out of their bodies and fight each other, and then they fight to death. And meanwhile, Mary Jane is catfishing a would-be adulterer so that she can embarrass him. Like these are the plots, and so it's like demonstrably not Spider-Man at that time, written by a prolific and storied Spider-Man author, the guy who killed Gwen Stacy. All the contradictions and beauty of comic books and serialized fiction is on display.
Yeah. Listen, man, at that point, they're 30 years deep into Peter Parker stories. You got to shake things up. And now we're 30 years later than that. We're in the...
Right. Yeah. But I'm new. I need to know who Peter Parker is right now. And they're like, I mean, you'll probably get, but I did. And here's how, right? Because in the fight between Spider-Man and Puma, when he puts on his Spider-Man costume, because that's what I'm there for. Because when I first saw that costume at the end of Muppet Babies, I went, I need this. Yeah. Because at the end of Muppet Babies, it was made by Marvel Productions.
And he shows up in the logo. Yep. I
don't know if it was CG or what. It was just an insane looking Spider-Man. Yeah. But I was like, I need this. But he puts on his Spider-Man costume, fights Puma. And in the internal monologue, he remembers this story about when he was at camp as a child before his spider powers, and how he was pushed to his limit and fought like 10 bullies at once. And I'm like, this tells you who Peter Parker is.
Yeah.
In a scene where Spider-Man's in a location he never is,
Yeah.
fighting a villain he rarely ever fights.
Yeah.
In a situation he would never want to be in because it's to the death.
Yeah.
All those things are there, and all the contradictions are on display, and yet it still got me in.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things. I think similar time frame. I think I had comics. I had some Spider-Man comics. I had some Batman comics prior to this, but the first one I remember getting was at a swap meet in Arizona, and it was, I think it was the first Ben Reilly Scarlet Spider appearances, because I think it's like I saw the red costume and the hoodie. I'm like, well, that looks cool.
Yeah, that's it. That's all it takes.
And then I think it was either there was two because obviously there was a bunch of like multi-part Ben Reilly stories going on in those years. You know what I mean? So it's one of there was it might have been the Exile. It might have been right before he became Spider-Man. But I remember, I think it was the Exile. And then because we also had Felicia Hardy's Black Cat in there in her the 90s version of the costume. The neckline
went all the way to her navel.
And I remember, I was just getting old enough. I'm like, this makes me feel a certain way.
This appeals to me.
Yeah.
This appeals to me in a way I can't quite explain.
Yeah, I don't know how to articulate it yet. I'm not at an age that I can articulate it, but I think I like this Black Cat character.
I need more of this in my life. Yeah, absolutely. No, I know exactly what you mean.
And I still have a soft spot for Ben Reilly to this day. I
know. So many people were brought in because of Ben Reilly. It was one of those things where I was colored by the opinions of the Wizard magazine editorial staff who were like, this is terrible and stupid, and Ben Reilly sucks, and I hate him, and everyone hates him, and it's the worst. And I'm like, right. I mean, I do.
Yeah.
And it's nice to know the entire staff of Wizard does, so I guess everyone does. And I'd be very flippant about Ben Reilly. People would be like, whoa!
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, you must be the one. And it's like, no, there's literally dozens of them.
It's the secret.
No, there's hundreds.
The secret sauce to any character, and I'll die on this hill. This isn't necessarily longevity, but to a character's popularity is, do they look cool?
Right.
You know what I mean? If they look cool, you're halfway home.
Absolutely. Just don't fumble the ball now. Make them interesting, relatable. That's all you need.
Yeah, if you can because it's Miles Morales. There's obviously a lot of appeal to that character, but his costume, he looks cool. It's a cool take on the Spider-Man costume. Ben Reilly, the Scarlet Spider costume looks cool. I think his Spider-Man costume looks cool, and that's all I needed as a kid. I'm like, that looks cool. I'll check that out. That looks cool.
I understand that mentality now. I do.
It's the same thing. Like, why is Spawn still on stands? It's like, well, Spawn looks cool.
He always does.
Yeah.
And when he doesn't, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I love Spawn, and I don't. I think it's terrible.
Yeah.
But I have over 100 issues of it.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got a Wolverine behind you right now. It's like, I mean, that's why going from the Incredible Hulk to becoming part of giant size X-Men. Obviously, the longevity is because there's a lot of appeal to the character, but that initial there's something there. It looks cool.
Looks cool.
He looks cool.
Looks cool. Has a great attitude. That's it.
That's it, man. That's all you need. Especially in the Wolverine's pre-90s, but you know what I mean. Especially in 90s comics.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'll even argue, dude. Do I like Superman electric powers? No. Did he look cool? He looks kind of cool.
I hate how streamlined and iconic his blue suit is.
Yeah.
I'm like, it was great. I wish it weren't on Superman, but it also wasn't. It's not like you can give it to someone else. They did. They give it to Livewire, but again, it's like
they gave it to Livewire. Didn't they just recently give it to John Kent? Like maybe this
did for a really awful run.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. So what do you think? Like right now? So I've just in the last 10 years since you've been doing the show, I feel like I've seen. Let me rephrase it this way. I feel like comics are an interesting place right now because, when you were first starting out and when I was over at SourceFed and stuff like that, there was unfortunately, the comic industry never seemed to crack the code of taking the popularity of the movies and translating that into people buying the material. And I do I didn't want to derail on this, so I won't spend too much time on it, but I do think that is comics inability, the comics fandom inability to accept new things and adapt, and adapt, and maybe like with format and but whatever.
Yeah.
So, there's obviously a lot of interest in those characters and everything, but now we live in an age where we're in a post DCEU world. We're in an age where post Endgame world where Marvel Studios is a little bit shaky. We don't have all those DCCW shows. And I feel like, comics have always been kind of a bubble industry, at least as long as you and I have been around. But I do think there's this interesting like sense I have, and I wonder if you have the same feeling, or maybe I'm off base, of comics being like, okay, so like what now? Now we don't even have the movies really. What are we doing now? You know what I mean?
Yeah, comics are always in a weird place, and they're always dying. They're always, on the cusp of irrelevancy, and yet they're always here, and they're always like impacting, and they're always influencing new generations of artists who then take that concepts and bring it to bigger masses. But, this period right now that we're in with comics is, we're both, the big two are both owned by major studios.
Yeah.
DC has been owned by a major studio for our entire lives.
Yeah. It's just now they care.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing, right? Because like it's always been that way.
Yeah.
But what's different now? And what's different now is just business practices. I think that like comics they're always an exception. Like they're not going to make millions of dollars except for that time they did.
Yeah.
They're never going to reach the masses like they may have when they were like 2 cents.
Yeah.
But like they're also not. They're not like, okay. So here's an interesting point, which has always been the case with comics. If you sell a book within a certain range of numbers, it's essentially your book to lose.
Yeah.
Like if Chip Zdarsky could sell Daredevil at 40,000 copies every single time that Daredevil comes out.
Yeah.
And he loves Daredevil like Dan Slott loves Spider-Man. Then he could conceivably write Daredevil for 20 years.
Yeah.
Like it would be a book that would be his until he died.
Yeah.
Or just got creatively tired and left, which is what happened.
Yeah.
But in no other industry today is that real. Where a company's like, we make this certain amount of money off of this certain amount of output.
Yeah.
And we are content with that arrangement.
Yeah.
That is so foreign and alien to every other industry on Earth. Where it's like, in a world today where it has to be constant and consistent exponential growth.
Yeah.
And there's something beautiful and intriguing about that in the comic book industry, and it's something that I want the studio overlords to ignore and forget about completely. Like they need to just leave comic books alone and not try and infect them. It's why, and I think that part of that is because the people who are in the comic book industry are the people who have been in the comic book industry or influenced by it for the last 65 years.
Yeah.
So, it's only when you get people like Bill Jemas back in the 2000s, who was a terrible leader and a reviled character who did bring in interesting business practices that did help propel Marvel, but not without help and not without comic book like titans. The last thing we need is Kevin Feige to be the chief creative officer of Marvel Comics or, anyone at Warner Brothers to have any influence over that comic book line. Yeah. Because that's when you're going to see the death of comics, or at least the death of big two mainstream comics.
Yeah.
I would say, like, on a good level, there are, I think, more good comics being made today than ever before.
Yeah.
And just like there's more better television being made today than there ever was.
Yeah.
Because there are so many outlets and so many avenues to do it, and the bar has been risen by so many better shows that came before it. Like Breaking Bad came in, and people were like, "Oh, you mean like The Sopranos came in, and people were like, whoa, that's what we can get from premium television." And then Breaking Bad came in, like, whoa, that's what we could get from like cable television. And comics are the same way, where it's like, here's something that you probably never expected, and It's just that they've been doing it 30 years longer.
Yeah, and
Like,
it's interesting too that I think with the advent of Image and what Image has become, it's interesting when that company first started, it became like we're going to do our own superheroes. That's not the innovation that Spawn and Savage Dragon are not the innovation that Image brought to the industry. What the innovation they brought is some of the best independent stories and a resurgence of stories outside of superhero comics. Contributing to what you're talking about, like some of the best stuff we've gotten, especially since you and I have been alive. But let's stick with Big Two for a second.
Sure.
You and I have a show called Mutant Academy where we talk about everything X-Men. We just did all the movies, and we've been talking about the animated series now. You can check that out on Only Stupid Answers. So I gotta ask you, as of this recording, we're leaving the Krakoa era. This is what's defined X-Men for 3, 4, 5 years. 5 years?
Yeah.
5 years?
Yeah, just about.
For those not familiar, basically every X-Men character moved to a living island together and created a nation. Good guys, bad guys, everybody. And it really revitalized the line. And now 5 years later, they're retooling it. One presumes because the movies are getting ready to do their own X-Men thing. Where are you caught up with the end of the Krakoa era? And I don't think they've dropped any from the Ashes books yet as of this recording.
No, we haven't gotten, as of this recording, any new books outside of the preview book that came out from Free Comic Book Day. We did get a Free Comic Book Day sampler that kind of showed us what the era is going to look and feel like. And I couldn't care less.
It's not moving the needle for you.
Not at all. I see the designs, I see the ideas, I see the creative teams, and I'm just not interested. I'm just not interested. And not that I was a die in the wool Krakoa fan. I was reading some of it, and I think Krakoa is working. And I'm amazed that it was able to give itself an ending the way it did.
Yeah.
I question the motivations of this new era for X-Men outside of just, it needs to feel like the 90s and it needs to sell. And I'm like, but why does it need to feel like the 90s? I understand why it needs to sell, but why does it have to be hearkening to the 90s? Not that I have any particular qualms with that. I'm from there. I like those books, but I don't know. They're getting a new editor. Tom Brevoort is going to be taking over the line of X-Men. He's going to be dictating it. He was a creative. He's been a creative force, and he's
didn't he help revitalize Avengers? Yeah.
He's been huge, and he's been with Marvel for decades, and nobody knows more about Marvel than he does. And I would mourn the day that he leaves or no longer helps with the comic books, because I think he's vital to the department. But I also think that his ideas for X-Men are a little old and a little short-sighted. And I'm I question the motivation and whether it's going to succeed, because it looks like, from the outside looking in, it looks like there's this kind of we alienated a lot of people with Krakoa mentality. And now that we're giving them superhero, 90s X-Men comics, they'll all come back. And I'm I don't think that you did. I don't think that and I think more likely you're going to alienate the new fans you made with Krakoa rather than bring back the fans you lost because of it.
Yeah, it bums me out. We talked a little bit about it with the Ben Reilly and the Electric Blue Superman. And one of the things that bums me out about superhero comics specifically, this is not necessarily, because one of the things I love about comics generally is their ability to, because you can do anything on that comic book page, anything the writer and the artist can conceive of. You can do, and you don't have to worry about it's the same budget either way, whether you're doing a conversation scene or a big space battle. It's the same budget, and so you get more storytelling freedom in comics, why I think Hollywood, especially with the advent of CG and a lot of that technology, has grafted onto them, because it is an idea factory. And so that's an aspect about the medium that I truly love, and especially when you're talking about comics in the 80s and 90s, in the advent of Vertigo and the beginning of Image and stuff like that. There's a lot less oversight Then there is now. So you can get like, I don't know that you get a Grant Morrison starting out today, like you do back in the 80s, where they're like, oh yeah, you want to do what with Doom Patrol? Sure, go to town. You know what I mean? Now it's like, oh no, sorry, we needed to be more marketable to the middle America, so you can't do that story.
Well, on that same token, though, like, yes, that's true. But like Doom Patrol wasn't selling, so you were able to do whatever you want with it.
Because Doom Patrol,
so it's like you'll be able to get Grant Morrison's and company from different niches that aren't regarded by the big leagues, like because they always had that same mentality. Even before movies were king for superheroes, they always had that mentality where they're like, well, this is Amazing Spider-Man. You can't mess with that. Like you can't, like, and what's funny is also, of course, like in the 90s and 2000s, they were like, well, the marketing budget's going to go to our best-selling books, like Spider-Man and X-Men. And people, like writers who were trying to do something different and change stuff up, were like, why? If those books sell, why are you spending money selling them?
Because they already
sell automatically.
You don't need and that's true across industries. But something that does bother me, and I think touches on some of the other stuff, is that, and I feel like it's grown into a general cultural problem. I think it's something we have across the board now, is this retreating into the past, retreating into nostalgia. I would argue that I think Peter Parker should retire in the 90s, and it should have been Ben Reilly until Miles showed up, and now Miles could be Spider-Man.
Right.
Why not? Like, why? Because we gotta, and so even though the Krakoa era wasn't my favorite, although there were some books that I liked out of that, this retreat back into 90s X-Men, it's like, do we always need to like slingshot, the dissolution of Peter Parker's marriage, you know what I mean? It's like, does it always need to rubber band back to this status quo? Like, why didn't we, could we have gotten Krakoa for 10 years, 20 years, and then done something new then,
Well, and we know that like the architect of it, Hickman, wasn't even going to do it for as long as it had been. So maybe they were like, their pursuit of money and fandom came from extending Krakoa, which we're giving its flowers for being so innovative and interesting and different. But like, I don't know if with respect to the current status quo of X-Men, which I don't really understand or know, that's really the problem. It's not even that, like, I know that it's 90s inspired because I have media literacy. And I noticed that all the logos are from the 90s now. Like that they brought back the logos from the 90s, and that and then they picked like writer or artists like Ryan Stegman, who's great and has a very distinct style. And it's not what Krakoa looked like. And that's not condemning Stegman. I love Stegman. I think he's awesome, and he's great for like these bombastic Marvel events, like King in Black, where it's sweeping epic battles and cityscapes and super heroics. But getting him is saying we're getting back to basics. We're doing this. But I honestly don't even know what the hell X-Men's supposed to be now. Like I'm looking at like the rosters and the teams and the mystery of like a Professor X and a Magneto helmet and his face being obscure. I'm like, I don't know what mystery you're trying to sell me by putting it in a poster, but like I can't get my footing with this. And I read your little preview in Free Comic Book Day, and I did not like it. Not even like, I didn't like the premise. I'm not one who says that Krakoa needed to stay. It's just, I was ready for it to go because I knew Hickman wanted it to go in the first place. I'm like, all right, well, when it goes, it'll be satisfying and cool. And it kind of was. But I don't know. I'm looking at this and I'm like, I know it's supposed to be 90s inspired because I'm looking around at the marketing for it. But as far as what you've given me, it's not even like it's more of the same. It's just something else. And it's just not gripping enough.
And it's not, and with Krakoa, the direction was cohesive.
Right.
And it'll be interesting because I know with that, like Mark Russell's one of my favorite writers. I know he's doing X Factor. It's like, I'm going to be picking up X Factor then. He's writing it. I'll check that shit out. I'm in a little bit of a bind because as of this recording, I think they just announced that Joe Kelly is going to be the new main writer for Spider-Man.
Well, that's worse. They didn't even announce it. It was in a preview page that someone took a photo of on their phone and posted on the internet. Like there was a advertisement for Spider-Man in an upcoming Moon Knight book.
Yeah.
And it said Joe Kelly was the writer.
Was it that Fist of Khonshu thing?
Yeah.
Because it was also like, so wait, we're dropping, some shops get one copy of this variant cover that we're now randomly dropping next week. It's like, and I really like the current Moon Knight run. I'm a big Moon Knight fan. And so it's like, I'm your audience for this. It's like, and how am I getting this book? Where am I finding it? What is happening?
Right? No, I completely, I'm with you there. But this Joe Kelly thing, like, first of all, I don't know, because like Zeb Wells is leaving at issue 60, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it is Joe Kelly. Like, the fact that no one is saying it's not Joe Kelly, the fact that Joe Kelly hasn't come out and said, no, I'm only writing this one story, because Joe Kelly has written at least 1 or 2 issues of Spider-Man during the Zeb Wells run.
Yeah.
And it was just him popping in.
Yeah.
You know, just like J.M.D. Mateus, a writer from Amazing Spider-Man from 25, 30 years ago, 35 years ago, is writing a Spider-Man miniseries that is much enjoyed. And that doesn't mean he's going to take over Amazing either. I do think because I know how to like read the tea leaves more or less. Like, you know, you're looking at it like, well, we didn't hear from him. So it means probably it is true that Joe Kelly's taken over Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't just, but I would caution against the people who are saying it. You know, and I'm not giving you a hard time because like you just heard, heard like, hey, but like I'm seeing people look at the evidence, which is a blurry cell phone photo of the back page of a comic book.
Yeah.
And it just says Joe Kelly on Amazing Spider-Man. It doesn't say we're like, welcome Joe Kelly to Amazing. It's just Amazing Spider-Man number whatever, Joe Kelly and so being the creative team on it. I'm like, that doesn't mean anything. Like, that just means that Joe Kelly's doing that issue of Spider-Man. It doesn't mean he's officially writing Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And this is all to say, like, just be discerning with the things you get.
Yeah.
For all we know, he is. And if he is, that's the safest thing they could have ever done.
Yeah.
Because Joe Kelly has written for Spider-Man before. He wrote that really boring nonstop Spider-Man series that I didn't like. And he's also written like I Kill Giants. Like he's a great writer. He wrote that Spider-Man Daredevil series,
which was good.
Which was good.
Yeah, he's currently working on the Deadpool Wolverine World War III.
That's right. And he made Deadpool. Joe Kelly is one of the 3 or 4 people who made Deadpool the reason people like Deadpool.
Yep.
So like I could think of worse choices than Joe Kelly.
Yeah.
But Joe Kelly is, I think, a sign that was like indicated from the Zeb Wells run, because like Zeb Wells's run is bad.
Yeah.
It is a bad run. Yeah. And like I don't think that and like look, Zeb Wells has written stuff I love.
Yeah.
He wrote Hellions for the Krakoa era. He wrote Robot Chicken episodes that I've laughed out loud at.
Yeah.
He wrote for Star Wars stuff. Like he gets this stuff and he's a good writer in his own way, in his own lane.
Yeah.
But his Spider-Man run will be forgotten. Like if they could get away with making his entire run a dream and literally no one would bitch about it.
Yeah.
Like it's so bland and terrible.
That's something, you know, you're getting to, and that's what I was getting at is like Joe Kelly's a writer I really like. I really like his work for the most part. But it's one of those like, am I picking? I'm trying to think about, as we talk about the Krakoa era, it's like, what could you even do with Spider-Man at this point that would get me excited about Spider-Man?
That's what I'm getting to is like Joe Kelly does not blow, you know, wind to get you excited. And the reason is because the Zeb Wells run has proven to Marvel that they don't need one.
Yeah.
Like they were like, oh my God, like I think we all can admit that the Zeb Wells run is bad.
Yeah.
But it's still the #1 book every week it comes out.
Yeah.
So we don't have to try at all. Like now we could put Greg Land on the book. Like we could have like anyone write it and anyone draw it.
Yeah.
Like John Romita Jr. is known as the guy who drew Zeb Wells' Spider-Man run, despite the fact that there have been like 4 different artists on that run.
Yeah.
And I love Romita Jr.
Yeah.
But his work was the worst of his career on that book.
Yeah.
Like, so it's the worst of Zeb Wells and it's the worst of John Romita, and it was the #1 book every single week it came out.
Yeah.
That says to Marvel, it really doesn't matter who makes this book. That is a like autopilot book. All we have to do is make sure. And I think they thought that back when Nick Spencer was writing it.
Mm-hmm.
But Nick Spencer was also like, but I am going to fix that marriage thing.
Yeah.
And I think it got so close that editorial went, whoa!
Yeah.
And then they like kicked him off the book and made him wrap it all up real fast and then gave it to somebody. I think then it got split up and it was like Kelly Thompson and Zeb Wells and a bunch of other people. And it was like, what it was weird.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, no, it was, I think they were like, it's an autopilot book now. Amazing Spider-Man sells over 100,000 copies every week that it comes out. Well, then doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so Joe Kelly, why not? If Joe Kelly wants to do it and he'll listen to the editor, then I think he's got the job. That's what I think.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I just said, what would get me excited about a Spider-Man book? I am picking up Ultimate Spider-Man every month.
Oh, yeah. No, that's an exciting book.
Yeah.
And I'll bet it annoys the shit out of them.
Yeah.
Because that book also outsells Amazing every time that it comes out at the same week of Amazing.
Yeah.
Which is how it should be.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I'm like, that's exactly the lesson people should be learning is like, if you want Amazing to change, stop buying it. If you want Ultimate to beat Amazing, buy it instead of Amazing.
Yeah.
I was saying that when Renew Your Vows came out, which is a beautiful, great book. I loved that series for as long as it lasted until the time jump, which is stupid.
Yeah.
But Renew Your Vows, it was like, here's a universe where Peter Parker's married and he's got a kid. If it outsold Amazing Spider-Man, they go, well, I guess we know who's reading Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Like, we know what to do with this book.
Yeah.
We'll bring the marriage back and we'll do it and we'll sell the book again.
Yeah.
But like, it didn't. And I don't know I don't think it's because I don't think it's because people don't want what was happening in Renew Your Vows. I think it's just people aren't organized and they don't think about it.
Yeah.
I think that like because like everyone who said they hated the book was all online.
Yeah.
And it didn't even make and either they were all buying the book anyway, or they represent a significantly low margin of people who are reading that book.
Yeah.
But I think a significant portion of the people who are making that book sell every month were going, good, my copy of Amazing Spider-Man. I will put it in this sleeve, and then I'll put it in this long box, and I'm done. Because that's what I do. I collect it. I don't read it.
Yep. I think you might be right. And I don't have the budget for that shit. I'm only buying shit I'm reading, God damn it.
Yeah, how could I possibly do that? That'd be like if I go to the movies every weekend.
Yeah.
And I watch every movie that comes out, and then I go to Hollywood and I'm like, hey, these movies suck.
Yeah. But listen, so going back to the X-Men thing, obviously, one of the elephant in the room is the X-Men will be joining the MCU presumably soon. I mean, very soon with Deadpool and Wolverine, but like, that's alternate universe stuff. But as we've talked about on the show, that's on the horizon.
Yeah.
And we've got a couple questions from the Discord, the patreon.com/onlystupid-answers from the Discord. Grayson asks, what's the one thing the MCU needs to get right with the X-Men that you're worried they won't?
I think off the top of my head, I'd say Professor X. I think that Professor X is so easy to turn, like the easiest, most lowest hanging fruit you could possibly do is Professor X is actually a piece of shit. Like it is so the story. Like he's been a jerk more than he ever was a benevolent leader.
Yeah.
Like it's like, why would anyone listen to Professor X at this point?
Yeah.
You want people to love, respect, and admire Professor X. And it's something the Fox movies got right.
Yeah.
And it all starts with hire Patrick Stewart.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's like, you're going to need to get Professor X right.
Yeah.
Because you want him, like when he's disappointed in the X-Men, you want to be disappointed too.
Yeah.
Like and he's the reason why it's called X-Men in the first place. Like if you get Professor X right, everything else will pretty much fall into place because like, Professor X and Wolverine don't really have they don't have a relationship. It's a weird relationship, but it's one we don't need to see on display at all times. We already had a whole universe of that.
Yeah.
So you can get away with having like Wolverine be like a work in progress because it won't really affect Professor X. But like once you get Professor X, you'll get Cyclops and Jean and Bobby and everybody, and it's just going to work. And it'll fall into place if you get Professor X right.
Yeah, I think that's a good note, and I think I wasn't as over the moon with X-Men 97 as everybody else was, but I do appreciate that they weren't like Professor X is an asshole. It's like, no, he's a good guy. We need, for this premise to work, we need Professor X to be a good guy.
Yeah, they still like wanted to have their cake and eat it too when it came to that. Like they were like, Charles, you betrayed us, or at the very least, you didn't like give us enough of a credit and you didn't help us out, and you abandoned us and stuff. And it's like, yeah, but he isn't like a monster.
Yeah.
He isn't secretly Onslaught yet. Which they will definitely do in X-Men 97.
We 100% either season 2, season 3. We're definitely building that shit. We're definitely doing it, and the '90s kid inside of me loves it. What's the one thing MCU needs to get right with X-Men that you're worried they won't? I think this pairs with Leonard Kim's question was, who does Sal think are the most must have characters in the upcoming MCU X-Men movie. And when I'm thinking about things they worried they won't get right, and it aligns with my concerns with what they're doing with Fantastic Four. Like, it's just like, great, just do. And it's the same thing they did with Spider-Man. All you need to do, you have done the impossible. You have made a living, breathing Marvel universe in movies where these characters are connected and exist in the same universe. All you need to do, and part of that success, I'll remind you, is being like, hey, what if we just do Iron Man? What if we just do Cap? What if we just stay true to who these characters are? Yeah. So with Spider-Man, all they needed to do was say, hey, everything you know about Spider-Man is true. Here he is in the MCU. Yep. And instead it's like, well, now we're going to give him this best friend named Ned, who's in the comics is sometimes Hobgoblin, but that's not even on the radar for this. And his girlfriend's MJ, but it's not your dad's MJ. It's a completely, because we want it to be a reveal. And it's like, no. Yeah. Stop. Just get out of your own way and just do Spider-Man in this universe. It's the same thing. So it's like, okay, Fantastic Four. Yep. Great. All you need to do to have a hit Fantastic Four movie is understand your core four. Yep. Better than the other movies, and say, here they are in the MCU now. Here they are. Yeah, here they are because I would argue the MCU tone is a perfect. Some characters that doesn't. I would argue it's not the best fit for like a character like Doctor Strange. You need to switch that shit up for Doctor Strange. Fantastic Four. All you need to do is what you've been doing, and you've already got a better Fantastic Four movie than the other ones. Literally get Jon Favreau and some charismatic actors and make Iron Man again, but with the Fantastic Four. You're good to go. And instead, it's like, all right, don't worry. It's set in the 60s in an alternate dimension. It's like, what are you doing? What is happening? You have completely lost the freaking map. Yeah. Like, what are you talking about? Like, could it be interesting? Anything can be interesting, but why are you doing it like that? Why are you raising the bar of difficulty for yourself? Just do Fantastic Four. it's like you're the best man at a wedding, and you're like, I know what I'm gonna do. Yeah, I'm gonna insult the bride and groom. I'm gonna dig myself into a hole, but then I'm gonna hit them with so many wonderful compliments and anecdotes that it's gonna pull me right out of the pit and actually put me a little bit higher. Like, why handicap yourself? No, don't do that. And so what I'm worried about with X-Men is that it'll be the same, like, okay, so what we're doing is it's the Fox universe, but it's the Fox universe as the X-Men 97 universe. It's those actors, but if it's X-Men 97. And then we're going to merge that universe. It's like, I'm going to stop you right there. Yeah. Just do X-Men, man. Just do X-Men. Start over. Like, all you need to do is just say it's over. And like even then they'll make it weird where they're like, the energy from the two snaps, they made mutants into people. And I'm like, that's so you just need to say, like, Professor X was hiding mutants. Dude, for Mutant Academy, as of this recording, we just watched the beginning of the first few episodes of X-Men the animated series, the original animated series, which is very much the 90s team. And mutants are around enough that they built Sentinels, but it's the first time people are seeing X-Men. It's like, we'll cut you a lot of slack. We'll be like, mutants were there. You've met some of them, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Yep. And now they're so ubiquitous that now it's become a thing. That's it. That's all they need to do. Just be like, they were always mutants. What are you talking about? And we're going to retcon, like that joke, by the way, that Nick Fury lost his eye because a cat scratched him. That didn't happen. It was Wolverine that did it. Great. He had three scars. I was like, it's always going to be Wolverine. That's so great. What a great long game they're going to play. No. Yeah, no. And so that's when it's like, again, I was not, X-Men 97 is not one of my favorite shows this year, but like, just look at that. Just do X-Men, man. Just look at that. X-Men. That's what they did. And do X-Men. Yeah. No, I agree. It's so easy. Yeah. And yet they're gonna make they're gonna make it harder for themselves for no good reason. Like, they're digging themselves into a hole they're gonna have to dig themselves out of because they're not good enough to be able to dig themselves out of it to begin with. And I think they've married themselves to this multiverse concept that it's like, okay, the X-Men and the Fantastic Four need to be introduced through the multiverse, and it's like, but why do they? But they don't. Like, do you know the time to introduce the Fantastic Four? It was so easy to do. It was just it was a thing I was like back in the day where I'd be like, I was like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and had like optimistic concepts. Like, I loved the scene, like, in Civil War when Tony Stark meets Spider-Man for the first time, goes to his apartment, introduces the whole world, and I'm like, this is great. I was just so enthralled. Yeah. You need one scene
in the beginning of your Spider-Man Homecoming movie, where
Yeah.
Tony Stark does this, right? He pops in on Peter and he gives him a hard time.
Yeah.
To the point where like it's almost like he not that he lives here, but like we expect him to pop in.
Yeah.
And you see a scene where Tony is in his apartment and he just picks up the mail from Peter's desk. And he goes through it while he's talking to Peter, who's getting dressed to be Spider-Man in the other room. And one of the envelopes is from the Future Foundation.
Yeah.
And he just casually throws it in the garbage.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have him.
Yeah.
And just, whoa, who's that?
Yeah.
What's that all about? Oh, that's all happening over there. Just like, Thor literally saved the world over there and no Avengers came in.
Yep.
Just like the Mandarin was blowing up shit and no Captain America appeared and the president was
kidnapped. Can happen. Spoiler alert, stuff can happen off camera. That's a universe.
Okay.
Yeah. And or like my argument would be, because whenever they have the rights or whatever, it's like, what the government would probably try and do after an alien snapped away half of all life. Maybe let's send maybe let's send some scientists up there and see what's going on. And maybe while they're up there seeing what's going on, they get hit by waves. And then when they come back with powers, people are like, well, you know what? We're Sans and Avengers right now. And it'd be really good for us to have a superhero team we can throw in front of people. So that's you now. That's what you are.
Yeah, and that'd be actually really cool to see them like react like that. Like to see them go. That's the story, is them being like, "What are we, discount Avengers? Like that's not what we do."
Yeah.
And like Reed Richards trying to like do research and just get back to being a scientist, and they're like, "Nope, the Mole Man's attacking."
Yeah, and like exactly. And you could even set up an opening sequence where it's like flashback, like pre-snap. Reed's getting ready to do a presentation. Tony Stark shows up, and you realize they knew each other, and so that informs like when they're like, "You're the new Avengers, Fantastic Four. We've got the branding and everything." He's like, "I didn't like Tony Stark. I'm not Tony Stark. I'm not action guy. I'm research guy. I'm fun. Yes. I'm fun dad guy. I'm not. I don't want to be this."
Yeah. Yeah, like no, and I also I'm personally kind of insulted that only when Tony Stark is dead do you actually give me that job.
Yeah,
like
no, he was always smarter than Tony Stark.
I've always been smarter. Yeah. I'm just not as loud.
Yep.
Like that's the movie
there, man. And dude, and the other thing I would have always is like, what you should do is make Sue Storm an ex-Shield agent. She was around running around doing that stuff. Like have it.
Yeah.
So I don't.
Good at disappearing.
I'm worried that they're hung up. I'm worried that they're hung up that they want it to be the first family again. So it's like, we got to start with Fantastic Four. It's like, just build off what you did. Just build off what you got.
Don't fuck it up.
All right. So we'll finish up with Leonard Kim's question. What does Sal think is the must-have characters in the upcoming MCU X-Men movies? Who do you have to have?
You got to have Professor X, which we established.
Yeah.
You got to have Cyclops. Cyclops is so important and so vital. And X-Men 97 like proved that to the audience. You got to have Storm. Yeah. Because Storm is just such a fun, beloved character and hasn't been done right yet outside of X-Men 97. So it's like, that's a great opportunity for you guys. And you gotta have Wolverine.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to be on the team, but you gotta have Wolverine.
Yeah.
Because that's what people are here for. Like, look, if I'm going to see an X-Men movie and it's in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and I'm seeing all these fun references and stuff, I'm not waiting 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
For the 05 to like have a falling out and form X Factor and then Wolverine to show up. Like, no.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't have to be a member of the X-Men, although I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
But he has to be in the universe. Like, we got to get Wolverine going. If nothing else than to have Wolverine team up movies. But we need Wolverine. We need 100% establish the new Wolverine and get going with it.
And you'd hope they'd be smart enough to know, to your point, be like, okay, we already know Wolverine's going to have his own standalone. Our Wolverine's going to have his own standalone movies.
Yes.
He's a successful enough character. That's a no-brainer. Because if they're not looking at X-Men and being like, well, we can have this thing, like the comics, it can have its own pocket of multiple things. And so I think I would have Wolverine in the first X-Men movie, but he's not. It's not Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. He's not the main guy. He's around. You kind of like X-Men 97 used him. You sit on that. He's there, but you sit on that until it matters. You know what I mean? Until you need it. But he's there.
Wolverine movie has to be him fighting the Hulk. Like just a straight up Hulk versus Wolverine.
And honestly, if Kevin Feige, ring, all right, Wolverine, what are we doing? I'm like, I would start with a flashback where he's on like a fucking air transport. and maybe you have somebody in the Captain America costume walk by.
Yeah.
We're not able to get Chris Evans back, but he's there. And then he can lean over and Bucky's there. And then you have Bucky and Wolverine, like, Wolverine bitches about Captain America to Bucky. And you're like, all right, he was there.
Yeah.
He was there. I'll even like do what they did in X-Men Origins with the Wolverine through time, but now it's the MCU history. And now I give a shit.
I'll take it. I'll take it wholesale. I'm in. That's what I wanted with Spider-Man. Was like Spider-Man was in the whole MCU the whole time. How does that work? And they just didn't do that. Yeah. Except that awful half-assed retcon of he was in the Iron Man costume at the trade show. And I'm like, it was in Queens. I kind of love the idea of Peter going to the expo, but I don't like that.
Yeah. But So I'm with you. I think the core stuff, especially since a lot of the core characters, Cyclops, Storm, Jean Grey, were underserved in those movies. It's like now it's an opportunity. What I've been trying to say is don't do what you did with Homecoming. I don't need alternate takes on MJ, and I don't need Spider-Man to have his own Genki. I don't need you to go like, well, we've already had a bunch of movies with Cyclops and Storm, and so let's never ever do them ever again. It's like, no, incorrect.
Incorrect. No, like I want the Phoenix. Put them in a Starjammers movie.
Yeah.
Like you can. These are not broken concepts. Apocalypse does not suck.
Yeah.
They did it wrong.
That's all you need. So now it's an opportunity to do it right. It's like, no, it's already been done. We can't ever do anything that they've ever done ever again. All right. That's my concern.
Let's start with Mr. Sinister. Ugh.
All right, dude. Thanks for joining me for this. Remind the kids at home where they can find you.
Swing by youtube.com/comicpop and youtube.com/comicpop returns. Check out me and my friends having fun with comic books. Maybe we'll have some fun together ourselves. Come on by. Check that out.
This has been on DJ Talks Trash. I'm trying stuff on my personal channel. I've got some other little videos on there. You should check out, peruse, see if you're feeling it. My podcast network is Only Stupid Answers. That's where you can find the shows I've been talking about, Mutant Academy and Spider-Versity and stuff like that. So go check that out, and I'll see you all next time. Bye, everybody.